Questions for Mad Men by Hershida. The first question is, how would I describe the men? Well, you can see in the episode that there are shown different roles of men and women. But some of the quotes that I found interesting I wrote down. These quotes mostly support the generalizing typical man who views the woman as something less worthy than their own gender. So we have I Love Smoking by the waiter in the beginning. Ladies Love Magazines by the waiter again. You gotta let them know what kind of guy you are, then they'll know what kind of girl to be by Pete. Should we drink before the meeting or after, or both by Romano. If you pull your waist in a little bit, you might look like a woman by Pete. If I know these guys, you're better off with a little sex appeal. Can you give me a woman in a bathing suit by Dawn? And She's Worth $3 million by Dawn's boss. Through these quotes, the viewer gets a better understanding of how men think and where their priorities are. They see themselves as something of high value as they think they have the right to comment on women and how they can look like a woman and how they should act and behave. This episode portrays the men as someone who cares about money, sex, power, and respect. The second question is, how would I describe the women? Again, we have some different types of women here, and we see this when, in the beginning, Dawn and Mitch, they talk. Dawn says, we should get married, and Mitch responds with, you think I'd make a good ex-wife? But the men who designed it made it simple for a woman to use by Joan when she explains to Peggy the technology in the office. And lastly, when Rachel and Dawn have their meeting, she keeps saying that if she weren't a woman, she wouldn't have to choose between wearing an apron and help with her father's company. And simply throughout the episode, many of the women comment on Peggy and how she should show her legs more because her boss would like it. And when Joan says that men love scarves, and it's not really what they think they want to wear, but mostly what would impress the men in the story, in the episode. First characterization is of Peggy Olson, and Peggy Olson is the new girl in the office who has to be secretary of Don Draper. And she's different from the other girls and women because she's not interested in male attention, and she just cares about her work, and she's very innocent and very responsible, and she sees herself as a very responsible person. When she says, I really am a very responsible person to Dr. Emerald, and I hope you know that I'm not that kind of girl, when she's in Don's office and she tries to impress him, but he rejects her, and she realizes that's not really what she wants, but she just does it to impress her boss because of her work. And then she tries to do everything to be a good girl and do as she's told, especially with Joan. Whenever she tells her to buy something or get something, she does it, and she goes to the doctors. And then she ends up sleeping with Pete, which is like a mix of a good girl plus a bad boy. Second characterization is of Joan Holloway. She's also working for Don Draper, and she seems to know the office quite well and the men, and she seems to have accepted her place and that she's just supposed to satisfy the men. She doesn't really talk about her work that much, mostly just how to impress the men and what to do to make them happy. And she knows how to act like the woman that the men want. Like when she says he may act like he needs a secretary, but most of the time they're looking for something between a mother and a waitress, and the rest of the time, well, and then she laughs because she knows that she has to like impress them and satisfy the men by doing something sexual. So the third character we have is Don Draper. He has black slick hair, he has a deep voice, and he cares very much about his own image and his work. And throughout the episode, whenever he feels like he's been too hard on someone, he keeps saying it's the tobacco thing. And also, he's a lot more mature. He's a man, and that's different than the rest, like the other main characters, because they're mostly young. And he's much mature, and he apologizes quick to Peggy on behalf of Pete whenever he comments on her being a woman and like he's being totally sexist. And then, for example, when he talks to Dr. Gutman, he says Miss Gutman and she corrects doctor, and then he rolls his eyes and says Dr. Gutman, which seems like he kind of sees himself as something of more high value than the women. And he also says, I'm not gonna let a woman talk to me like this. So his image of being a man is huge. And he cares about his work, like I said. And that's when he says advertisements are based on one thing, happiness. He knows what he's working with. And then we end up seeing that he has a wife and 2 young kids. Lastly, we have Pete Campbell. Pete Campbell also works in the office, and he's young. He's 26 years old, and he's marrying his fiance. And we think that it's mostly because her father is very rich. And also in the beginning, when we are introduced to Pete, he says he's on the call with his fiance, and he says, I'm giving up my life to be with you, aren't I? Which sounds like he's giving up his life to be with a woman he should love and care about. But it doesn't seem like love. It just seems like, oh, I'm giving up my life. And then again, we see him at his bachelor party when he says, you said you like to laugh, and he touches the girl inappropriately, which also shows the image of Pete. And he goes to see Peggy while drunk on the night of his bachelor party, and it seems like at the end of the episode when he goes to see Peggy, it seems like he actually does care about her, or he actually does like her, but he's just too young to understand the real world. Also, like the office work, it seems like he's not as smart as Don Draper, because Don Draper is much older and he has much more knowledge about it. And also with the marriage, it seems like he only thinks he hasn't experienced love, and that's probably what he experiences with Peggy at the end. By the end of the episode, Rachel and Don have a business meeting. Rachel says the following to Don. Mr. Draper, I don't know what it is you really believe in, but I know what it feels like to be out of place, to be disconnected, to see the world laid out in front of you the way other people live in it. And there is something about you that tells me you know it too. And what do I think it means? Well, first of all, she talks about the life of being a woman, because also, like, when they have their first meeting at the office, they expect her to be a man, and she knows it. And she also jokes and says, yeah, my father expected me to be a boy. And also, this makes sense when the audience finds out that Draper is married with 2 kids, and we have not known about this throughout the entire episode. He's living a weird life, almost 2 different lives, and no one knows that he's married. He seems unhappy as he explains to Rachel that love is not real, and it's just something made up by men like himself when they advertise. Also, whenever he keeps saying that he's stressed or he's being hard on someone because of the tobacco thing, it makes sense that it's probably not just the tobacco thing that's making him feel like that, but it's also the fact that he has a wife and he has 2 kids, and he doesn't really visit them that much. Like, we don't see that throughout the episode. And also, like, it makes sense whenever he's being quite respectful of the women in the story, or like the episode. So one of the secondary characters is Dr. Emerson. He is a gynecologist or doctor that Joan has recommended to Peggy because she told her to get on the contraceptive pill. And Dr. Emerson says that he's not judgy and he doesn't care if you're into, like, if you have a lot of sexual activity as a woman, but he does say even in our modern times, easy women don't find husbands, which kind of means that he's trying to convince Peggy that even if you take the pill and even if you do so, it's gonna be difficult for you to find a husband. And because it probably means that he can see that she's not that type of girl. And he says, don't think you have to go out and become the town pump just to get your money's worth. He's trying to, like, really convince her to not just become what you call a whore. It also seems like his view on women is very low, because he keeps saying that, oh, don't become the town pump and easy women and all that. So he's not really saying, oh, you can be smart and you can do this and you can do that. He just says you don't have to be an easy woman. It seems like he just thinks that all women are easy women. The character we have is Mitch. She's introduced within the first 3 minutes, and Mitch has her own business and she's very independent. And compared to the other women who work for men, she works for herself. She speaks her mind and she's being honest, and she doesn't really try to do or say something that would satisfy or please men like Dawn. Like she says, I don't make plans and I don't make breakfast. She's not a typical woman who just thinks of getting married and settling down and having kids. She just wants to enjoy her life and be herself. Betty Draper is the wife of Don Draper, who we meet in the final episode minutes of the episode. Betty is a mother to 2 children, and she's very beautiful, and she's soft and sweet, and she's very gentle with Draper. She trusts Draper because she thinks that he just goes to the city to work and stays there to work, but she doesn't know that he's also with other women. She has blonde curled hair and a yellow nightgown. Salvatore Romano is Draper's art director, and he's Italian, and he is not very mature, I would say, because he talks about women as if they're nothing. And he just, when Dawn says, give you a chance to get a real model for their advertisement, Romano says, oh, I love my work, because he gets to see a model with just bikini on. And he also says, if a girl's gonna shake it in my face, I want to be alone so I can do something. And he also says, better do more than look tonight, which just shows what kind of character he is.